Hello and welcome to Top Story. How do you replace a living legend? What do you do when the man who's led your country for 49 years and defined its place in the world announces that it's time to step down? Because that's the question that Cuba's National Assembly attempted to answer on Sunday. Its solution? Your point is brother. The election of Raul Castro to succeed Fidel keeps the leadership with the old generation that led the revolution of 1959 and formalizes the position that Raul has held since Fidel Castro underwent intestinal surgery in July 2006. But while Raul is himself 76 and thought to have been reluctant to take over the reins of power, as defense minister, he commands the support of the military, one of the key pillars of the Cuban state, but critically, he's also believed to be an advocate of major economic reform and structural change. But will he be just a stopgap while a younger generation prepares Cuba for the challenges that lie ahead? And will Raul still be in the shadow of Fidel, who's promised to continue to be a critical observer of political events? Well, joining me now to answer those and other questions is Victor Dedage, who's co-author of the book Cuba est une île, Cuba is an island. Thanks very much for being on Top Story. On the face of it, it looks like a pretty conservative decision by the National Assembly. Raul, 76, and the man who's his deputy, Machado Ventura, 78.
Yeah, but that's how it's always been with Cuba. There's the appearances and the reality. Appearances are generally made for the public relations side, messages to other countries, messages to other people. Experienced people need to be on top, but the younger generation is slowly coming up more and more. The National Assembly, for instance, is one of the youngest national assemblies in the world. I think the average age is about 46, 47 years old. But to understand what's going on, this process of transition, I think we have to go back 1.5 years ago, just before Fidel got sick. Because at that time, just a few weeks before, the Bush administration had issued a document called Assistance for a Free Cuba, which the chairman or the chairwoman being Condoleezza Rice herself. And in that report, in that document, it was specifically stated that everything would be done by the United States to stop any transition from Fidel Castro to Raul.
But what does this tell us about the mindset, though, do you think, of the Communist Party? I mean, you say that the Assembly is relatively young, but the leadership, nevertheless, remains very old.
I think the Cubans are convinced that they don't have the right to make a mistake. That they're 150 kilometers from Miami. They've suffered more than 3,000 terrorist attacks.
But I mean, the problem, though, is if you appoint somebody who's 76 and another one who's 78, there's every chance that you could be having another leadership crisis a year down the road.
Well, you called it a leadership crisis, but was there a leadership crisis? I mean, everything worked out smoothly and as expected from the Cuban point of view. I mean, people from the outside and the anti-Cubans and the American administration were warning that there would be upheavals, that would be riots in the streets the day that Fidel Castro stepped down. The Cubans were saying, well, everything will go on as usual, everything has been planned, and that's actually what happened. I don't think there could be any crisis in the sense that, oh my God, the leadership has disappeared. They've always planned that Fidel could have been murdered. They've always planned that Raul could be murdered, and everything has always been planned for a smooth transition.
But isn't it a bit reminiscent?
Up to the 5th or 6th level, I think it is.
Don't you think it's a bit reminiscent, though, of the Communist Party in the Soviet Union through the 60s, 70s, 80s? People began to talk about the gerontocracy because the leadership became so old, and eventually they passed power to a younger generation, and then suddenly the reforms started happening, the Soviet Union collapsed. Isn't there a possibility that something similar could happen in Cuba?
Well, you're asking the question as if the Cubans had not analyzed this phenomenon and did not know actually and see what had happened in the eastern countries. So, of course, I think they're quite aware that things like that could happen, and that's why they've worked a lot on trying to train and form a new generation. But that takes time because surviving in Cuba, once again, 150 kilometers from Miami, is a full-time job. So you can't just hand-pick some youngsters and say, okay, you look good on TV, you'll be the leader.
But there had been talk that a younger man, 55 years old, Carlos Laje, might be the successor. He didn't get it. Why do you think that was?
Because, as I was saying, I think this is also a message to the United States and the administration. The United States, having said that they will not permit a transition, well, the Cubans are, it's like the... That's my humble point of view. Like a schoolyard, there's the bully that traces a line, that the bully being the American administration, and says, you don't cross that line. The line being the transition to Raul. What did the Cubans do? transition to Raul. They crossed the line and said, now what are you going to do? Nothing happened. And then they said again, well, we can't tolerate a transition to Raul. Well, all of a sudden now he becomes a president, and the Cubans are saying, now what are you going to do? I think they're sending the message, if any other message, that the ones who govern in Cuba are the Cubans and not the United States.
Okay, let's talk about Raul a bit, because how much is known about him? He's been in charge of the military for a long time. He used to be thought of as a hardliner, but perhaps a reformer in the making.
I think he's I don't know if there's much sense as far as the Cuban leadership is concerned to talk about hardliners as pragmatics and so on. They're all trying to get things done, and they're all trying to stay the most united as they can, because they know that's one of the conditions of their own survival. Not their survival as a class of leaders, but the survival of the independence of Cuba. That's what they think, and that's be it right or wrong. But he is known to be the man that makes things work. Okay, he managed to reorganize the state during the years 90 to eliminate bureaucracy. The army is a quite efficient organization. His daughter, for instance, is an activist for gay and lesbian rights in Cuba. So I would say he's surrounded by people who don't exactly correspond to what you were saying, this old leadership. I don't know if the daughter of Brezhnev was you know what I mean?
I doubt it somehow.
That's right. I don't think you can really compare. They're old, they're experienced, but they're not stupid.
But are we going to see a loosening up of things in Cuba? Will it become possible, for instance, they've been talking about this, freedom to travel?
Well, the freedom to travel exists. I contest that saying. People often say that, well, okay, we don't have the time to go into that. But things would loosen up. Things do loosen up and regularly loosen up. But as I said, the Cubans consider that they don't have, that they can't afford a mistake. You say that as if there wasn't an external factor, which is the United States of America at 150 kilometers. And the United States have intervened, will intervene, try to intervene, have the intention of doing so. And considering the last experiences of the United States interventions in other countries, I would say that the Cuban people in general are not over-thrilled by the idea of such an intervention. I mean, so things have to go slowly, because they can't make a mistake.
Okay, and that, I'm afraid, is where we're going to have to end it. Thanks very much to our guest, Victor Dedage. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of Top Story. Goodbye.